kind of in the quietness of this park to explain to you what we were trying to talk about this morning, where I wanted to explain to you how, in the theory of the Orion constellation, as it is in heaven, so it is on earth. There are several books, as we were talking about, that have been written on this. One current author would be Robert Bovall, The Orion Mystery, and now he's tying with Graham Hancock, who had previously written Fingerprints of the Gods. Both of these are world-renowned authors, but there's some inconsistencies and incongruities that need to be resolved in order for what they're saying to actually fit the scenario. So what I wanted to do, being a navigator in the Navy, United States Navy, for about 10 years, I have the skills as a navigator to do what they don't have, which is...
So what you're saying is that the star pattern in the skies is reflected in the way that they built the pyramids and the structures that are on the ground.
Precisely. No deviation. It's about as exact as you would ever want. It's the nothingness into something was someone's idea. And we hear it through myth and ritual, and Robert Bovall took it to a new level where he actually wrote a book, but in it he couldn't find two of the pyramids. And after reading his book, I kind of felt the error of what he had done to create the scenario where he couldn't find two of them. And I'm going to kind of describe to you, Dan and Drew, is as I'm walking in Egypt and making my discoveries, I like to test my system on the Egyptian peoples themselves. So what I'm going to do here is what I do in Egypt with the Egyptians, because they know the cities and the pyramids, but not in the manner or fashion that's going to be revealed whenever I finish with a scenario, and they're like this when they're finished. But
so you're going to lay out the whole pattern of where all these, where the stars are relative to actual pyramids, right?
Well, but in the scenario of doing it, we're going to go from the knowns, and then we're going to try to feel, if this is part of it, then we should be able to feel the unknowns.
Okay.
All right. So when we first start, we know that there's a city in Egypt called Zawiat el-Aryan. There's a pyramid there, and it's attributed to a third dynasty pharaoh, a dynasty before Khufu. And that one's called Zawiat el-Aryan. All right. Now, Zawiat el-Aryan, if we draw a meridian here, this is the celestial equator. And this is the north-south meridian that would be any meridian.
This way is south, right?
This is south, and this is north, this is west, and this is east. All right, so from the Great Pyramid being the center of the Orion constellation, we would then go to the south and over and plot or go to the city of Zawiat el-Aryan, which means cornerstone of the naked. Then from there, they also have another pyramid in the northwest of the Great Pyramid. It's up on a mountain. And this pyramid was given, the credit of building it was given to Rajadefa, which was the son of Khufu. Khufu giving credit for the Great Pyramid, Khafre II, and then Rajadefa upon Abu Dawash. Abu Dawash is the administration center for the first dynasties of Egypt, Menes. All right, and this is at least in the almanacs that we see. And then everybody knows that we have the Great Pyramid, we have the second pyramid, and then offset a little bit, and 18 seconds by calculation below the equator is the star Mintaka. So you have Zawiat, Khufu, Khafre, Mintaka, and Rigel. Or reversing it, you've got the Great Pyramid, the second, the third, Zawiat, and Abu Dawash. Okay. Now, Robert Bovall, in his theory, labeled this star, or this pyramid, Bellatrix, which meant that he would be looking for Betelgeuse under his scenario. What's up above is down below, but he can't find it. He labels this pyramid safe, which means he's looking for Rigel further out into the desert. And he can't find these two. And then through this, he's describing the Osiris text, where Osiris, when he died, he left from the city On, which was Menes' capital. They went across a body of water. They came to a place called Kem, which was the ancient name, or Kemet, for Egypt in the ancient time. Even before Egypt was Egypt, it was called Kemet. Right. So they come to one place called Kem. And then they made a turn, and they went into the center of the Duat to the fortress of Osiris, down through a gateway to become Orion. These are the texts of Unas, sixth dynasty pharaoh that is found in the Saqqara region. So with all this text of Boval and what he said, he's got this, and I know these areas of Letopolis or Kim, and it doesn't fit into the center of the Duat because he's got it twisted. So then I'm trying to straighten this out, and as a navigator, I just reapplied the same knowns and reconstructed the labeling for this particular pyramid to become Betelgeuse. So after I labeled this one Betelgeuse, I then named this one Rigel, which meant that I should be looking somewhere in this region for Safe, and I should be looking up in this region for Bellatrix. So after I plotted the scales of the latitude and the longitude of the known and the latitude and longitude of a known, I then took the right ascensions and declinations of the star, lining on to Khufu, being the zero meridian, of which the shaft in the King's Chamber will point to Al-Natak in the Orion group. After I did this, and then the alignment, I then took this right ascension and declination and gave it like a +9 for declination. I then took a -9 or 8 for the declination of this. Then I set new scales based on declination, that these would give me the balance of anything to this new scale. So then I went over from right ascension to here, got my units, and then I went to the right ascension of Bellatrix, and then I plotted my coordinates to where it would lie. And then I did the same thing down here for the star Safe, and I plotted it. So the next thing to do was to get on an airplane, go to Cairo, and then take the GPS, and first go to these places because these are assumed and reading off of maps, and you're really not quite sure. So I went and stood on top of this pyramid, marked it. Then I went down onto Zawiya or Abu Dawash and marked that position to get my absolutes by GPS, Global Position System, which is really a nice new tool to work with today. So after I had these two, then I needed to get what would be in an area that's just all desert. So I took the GPS and we're going out, and then approaching destination at destination. So then when I find pyramid rocks, the rocks that are classed as the rock with coin, and those are the same rocks that you see at the Great Pyramid, where you see the little anomalies that are in them. Well, the Egyptians call it rock with coin, and it's a very ancient stone, and it's very, very hard. So when I'm looking around for the evidences of these stones, the guide that's going with me out here, an Egyptian named Ahmed Shire, he tells me that 20 years ago, a doctor named Salim Hassan was out here in this exact spot trying to find the entrance to a pyramid. And then all these stones are from his digging on that spot, and I'm coming by GPS. He's been there 20 years ago with an Egyptian doctor. So I've got evidences of other activities before I arrived there to coincide with me arriving and locating the stones. So then we needed to go and locate or find the second missing pyramid of Robert Boval, which plotted down in the areas of the farms, which was called Berak El Khayyam. So when we go out to Berak El Khayyam, I sit in the little coffee shop there, and I send Ahmed, because he speaks good Arabic and he's an Egyptian, and ask him to look and find any structures that have the rock with coin. So he's doing a survey while I'm having coffee, and then it wasn't more than 10 minutes. He comes back, and he starts taking me to houses. There's two. There's a mosque and an old house. These houses are over 400 years old. They're on my charts from 48 that I'm working off of, so I know they've been there a long time, and they all have rock with coin. But that house is still not on the position of Safe. So we go out into the fields, and then as we're walking along these canals, this is about 45 feet of dirt where they're dredging for the farmers to bring the canal deeper, and they're putting 45 feet down on the sides of the banks. So then I start finding pieces of buildings, rock with coin, all the things that are 45 feet down to coincide with evidence that this star and this area have structures. So I located under this format Bellatrix and Safe. Bellatrix and Safe by Robert Boval, correcting I then find the two missing, and it comes into alignment with north, south, east, and west, with Al-Natak being 18 seconds below the celestial equator, and then Al-Nalam, or Al-Natak and Al-Nalam being the belt stars of Orion. Then we had some articles come up with Kemet where a guy named Chadwick was picking Robert Bauval's theories apart. And I agreed in a sense that he's wrong, but the idea is still a good idea with a couple little adjustments. And so I went on to verify or validate Robert Bauval in what he had theorized, but not being a navigator, couldn't quite get correct. So the reason I wanted to get with you guys is because there's a whole lot more in sacred geometry of which you're the master, really, in the world of this subject. And then you, because you travel so extensively regarding the ancient sites in China and around the world, and a world-class speaker, is that I wanted to kind of put all this down for you guys to see, because I've been lecturing on this, and I know you've gotten wind of what I've been saying, so that's kind of, I think, why we're all here, is that we need to share. And I want to let you guys discuss in just a minute what it is that you think all this means. So, after finding the four corner stars, reading a little bit of Kemet and the arguments with Chadwick, they were complaining that nobody, if this is so good, how come Saqqara and Dashur and Least and all the pyramids in the south, which are theorized to be Taurus and Gemini, which require further work? I was still wanting to focus up here, but one of the quick things is that we wanted to get M42 and 3, which would plot here. We also went by GPS and located the nebulas of Orion at the correct spot. Then it got to be really fun. Well, let's go look for the head. We plotted the head. We went up to the head, located it, and then when we get there, the person that takes me, I won't give his name, but his family's been digging here literally hundreds and hundreds of holes to what's down below. There's a city at this area also, of which you can find huge limestone with coin in them. And then when you go back to the village and you talk to the village people, the restorations workers, whatever you want to call them, they're verifying what's underneath this area.
Is it the same stones in all of these locations?
Exact same coin with stone, and here in a bit I'm going to show you guys these stones so that you can feel and see that each of these, over this vast area, 8 miles by 6.5, and even on out to 22 kilometers away, will all have the same technological stonework in them, which is common to the whole layout. After we've got the shoulders, the head, the belt, the sheath, the knees of Orion, I'm pretty much convinced that my gravitational astronomy of pulling stars to the scale is absolutely precise. But then I still need to go from the Orion constellation to the Lepus constellation. And Lepus, in the story of Robert Bauval of Osiris going from On to Letopolis and turning and going to here, I needed to lock onto these two spots. So I went 15.75 kilometers north of the pyramid, and I find a mosque called Mosque Katir at this spot, which represents Letopolis, and there's a star there called Lepus, that star and that mosque is all in alignment with the pyramid. Then...
But one thing here now, this mosque, how old is the mosque?
The mosque is over 400 years old, and it's on top of the spot that Horus, the opener of the mouth ceremonies...
So there has to be something under there.
Oh, yes, and then when I was there, I walked up on a mound. Boy, the guys with the beards came out. Oh, it's forbidden. So then they actually roughed up my taxi driver.
Under there.
Oh, yes, and then when I was there, I walked up on a mound. Boy, the guys with the beards came out. Oh, it's forbidden. So then they actually roughed up my taxi driver, popped his buttons off, and pushed us away from this mosque. And I was trying to film a tree. It's forbidden, this is a sacred tree. They were all upset. So then when we get around back to the car and we're leaving, they're throwing rocks at the car. Hostile place. But it was fun. We got the video walking around. We marked our spot on the mound, and it's precisely in alignment to the meridian on the Great Pyramid. And 15.75 kilometers as plotted by earlier researchers from France. Now I needed to go due east, and I needed to come to what would be the star Sirius, and then Sirius being really the cherry on top of all this. I'm confused because of the obelisk in Monterey, which is plottable. It's on the charts. I can take the coordinates and I can go there. But then when I put it into the scale that I'm working with of declinations and sizing this to keep it all proportional, I had to reposition where the obelisk is to where Cirrus should be. So we again sit down and we go through the calculations, and then we put it into the GPS, and then within just a few minutes we're driving and we're right on top of Cirrus. We find pieces of statues, parts of the pyramid rock with coin in it, and the guys that make tea sitting in this field. It's a farm field right next to an army base and the Central phone company. Right here plots the star Cirrus with the evidences and the stones around in the field. And then I tried to buy this stone that they're making the tea. And no, this is my favorite rock to sit on, and I couldn't buy this rock for nothing. So what I'm turning over to you now is a reality of research that I personally, as a navigator, 10 years in the Navy, excellent in my field, took these stars, brought them down by position, went to every one of these locations, and the star patterns that you see here are the cities and the pyramids that are known, and the ones that aren't known, I have the rocks and evidences of what's there and the village conversations to confirm. So I'm just trying to tell you that so that you'll really get the feel that until we can get you guys to go to Egypt and walk around with this, this is an epic discovery. And that's why I brought you out here, and I wanted to kind of show you with rocks, which is what I do with the Egyptians. And they see this, and they go like this. Because I've got Orion in the sky when I'm showing them to them. And they're going, oh, well, they play then. Well, I live over here with this star, and it turns into a joke. But they are impressed that all this layout mirrors exactly the Orion constellation. Now, what are you going to do with it?
Well, there's all kinds of evidence to show that the alignment of their pyramids, etc., were aligned to the stars. They know that. They know that the heavens and their buildings, that there is a connection just in the way that they're faced, the way they're aligned, and all these kinds of things.
They being either Khufu or pre-Khufu, or...
No, I just mean us, present-day archaeologists.
But aren't you in conflict with Orthodox Egyptology by thinking such a thing?
No, I mean they know that the buildings are aligned to
north, south, east, and west.
South. They know that the shafts are ranged pointing towards certain stars. They know that there is an importance with the stars. The Folka calendar is based on the Evical Rising of Sirius, which is one of these stars.
Right.
And so they understand that there is a connection. And then on top of that, I can't think of the ruin, the heart chakra, what's it called, where the Hathor temple is.
Abydos?
Dendara.
That's so far to the south. That's down
near.
Yeah,
but in there you have a calendar showing the astrological signs, so that they knew, they were very well aware of the stars. It wasn't something that was...
It was a star method.
Yeah.
But now, in that temple layout, when we see the temples, didn't they have ley lines that were once drawn and then they had to redraw them to align those temples to the universe so that they could express processional circuits and all of the rotundas up above? That those temples, before they were built, had one set of leys, and then I think was it Peter Tompkins in Mysteries of the Great Pyramid, one book that he had written, had shown that picture of the alignment, because that's an important part in this, is that why would we have two lines? Was it that the Earth was restabilizing or ratcheting?
Well, we definitely went through a change about 13,000 years ago where the poles shifted. This has been...
Yeah, and that shows a
right at this point.
But if you're... 10,500 and
10,500 BC.
Right. Or that was your number.
12,500.
All right, now, Robert Boval and Graham are really coming down heavy that's when all of this was constructed. What do you think about that?
I don't know about all of this. I believe that the one pyramid, the Great Pyramid, from everything I can see, was constructed about at that time. I think it's about 200 years earlier than that, actually. The rest of it, I think there's different dates on that, and I don't know exactly what they are. You feel
the speculation was that if the pole, or there had been a major tilt at that point, that phase locking a major zodiacal fractal paramagnetically would have assist in the function of stabilizing the Earth on a new axis. That was the perhaps overly romantic speculation about that, oh, here we had this major tilt in order to stabilize the wobble. See, the whole concept here is that if you phase lock the magnetic of zodiac spin properly, magnetically on the Earth, kind of a fractal embedding, that you literally stabilize gravity mechanically. The model that our group is playing with, and it's just playing with at this point, is that the possibility of wave recursion is what created gravity in the first place. That the waves that can have this one-way magnetic wind to center, which is what Einstein called gravity, is basically a wave system where waves have permission to approach center non-destructively. Recursion, optimized by phi, in other words. So just this whole idea that the romance here would be that, indeed, if your planet's gravity was messing up, you make a fractal and you stabilize the embedding, and that phase locks the spin.
Yeah. Further, we believe that the exact location of where they put the Great Pyramid is not only the center of the landmass, but it is on one of the points of the octahedral internal energies of the planet. And that's another way of linking in with the way that gravitational, after the Earth did its little flip, that was a way of stabilizing the whole thing by using these kind of energies to do that.
Or, as I would look at it, is that it was built in harmony with the expression of all of this knowledge. And that's why we have 365.24 days in a year. And the principle behind a pi pyramid is that it is encoding the orbital data of the Earth in a form. The Great Pyramid is an expression of all the laws that govern gravitational astronomy as it relates to the Earth in its orbit around the Sun over vast periods of time. And not to be, when we think of time, just a 24,000-year circuit or 5, that will recur again and again because it's monumentalized by the diagonals of corner to corner as an expression of what our constants are. Now,
the 24,000 years, is that you're talking about
the precession?
Okay, that's
25,800 and...
Yeah, almost 26.
All right, so that's why I'm just rounding it in here. But by using pi in the solar year and say 365.242465 and divide it by pi, you get 11,626, which is the radius of a circle. And then we go for the diameter, we divide by 2. But when we divide by 2, we have the actual height of the Great Pyramid, which now encodes the solar year. And then from corner to corner, it will give you, under that scale, the exact value for precession. And then if you look for Einstein's mathematical constant in the creative law of relativity, you come up with a 286.106 number. And that is the indentation of all the panels on the pyramid, where it's not a straight line, and all passages are offset 286 inches. The rhomboid of displacement by the Grand Gallery coming down into the subterraneans as the curves that would show here. But what I'm saying is that if Khufu didn't build this, and we can push it past 200 years, we really have a lack of a civilization that could do it, because in the time of Osiris, of the mythologies of Egypt, first he was a corn god, then he was a moon god, then he was a sun god, and then now he's a stellar god. And then at the time of Akhenaten, he reversed all this and made it one god. And then because of the politics of this, because you got to deal with the politics of dynasties in Egypt.
And they reversed it.
Yeah, and that's just all overlaying on something that was already here well before they ever came. Because I find petrified trees.
Oh, I believe this was here long before. Though, from our way of looking at it, it's not just this world. There's dimensional worlds involved here.
Oh, absolutely.
And so some of these were built in this time, but really they were built dimensionally even prior to that. And so it didn't matter if this one was built in one century or this one was built in another. The structure was built there, or the idea or the blueprint was there prior to the whole thing.
The need for the star map was very old.
Yeah.
And if we then go back, I remember you mentioned backing up to the octahedral sense, since Giza and Cydonia, according to most, have tetrahedral spin points with respect to the latitude, longitude of both Mars and Earth. The idea was that if you, supposing you were sort of had this musical top, and it's a planet, and you were talking about this earlier, the top is wobbling just a little bit, that's the metaphor you used, it was so fun, that if you wanted to grab a hold of the spin of a planet and modulate its spin just slightly, the place from which you would grab would be the tetrahedral leverage point, which then embeds two tetras inside and make octa.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so the sort of, this is sort of again, it's kind of a fairy tale, but the Arcturians say that this is called planet taming. That basically what you do is, you got a planet, oops, it's losing its atmosphere. Well, the first thing you do is you go in and you put some little paramagnetic weight at the tetrahedral leverage points, adjust the spin so the spin better phase locks the spin of the stars, the zodiac, and that improved embedding stabilizes the atmosphere.
It's similar to a tire when you're getting your car, you know, you put the weight on it and then it spins precise.
And the thing then is to understand that the improved embedding had everything to do with perfected, what we call perfected recursion, which gets us back to phi, the golden mean. That's why I was hoping Drunvalo would tell his little story about the...
I think I will, but I want to go back to Dindara, to the astrological chart there, because there was the work of McCullen, who did a survey there in 1985, I think it was, and Rocky McCullen, and he showed that these three stars, middle three stars of the belt, really had a curve moving through them. Now, I talked with Robert Drunvalo and Graham Hancock, and they weren't aware of that. They looked at these two as being in a straight line, and this one being deflected or displaced a certain amount, and they were looking in that way at it. They didn't know that there was a curve that goes through this, goes around and spirals around, and comes to a central point. There's actually two of them. One of them is a golden mean, and one is a Fibonacci. And then when you go back to those places, especially the Fibonacci one, they built a building there. And the building has a very specific shape. And the shape goes back to the work of Leonardo da Vinci, where he plots the human body into 64 squares, where there's 4 central squares and 4 squares around that. So there's 8 squares around the other.
This is the drawing you were doing this morning.
Yeah. And around the human body there are these spiraling energies that are theoretically there. And it appears as though whoever built these structures, that they were using the same kind of idea, because where the spiral comes in, they place the building in exactly that shape and those proportions. And if you plot it according to the numbers of the Fibonacci, which goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and you plot that around and form the curve, that is the curve that goes over the Great Pyramids. And so they were using that as just as that is the center of the human body and the basis of the whole structure of the human body, right down to the very egg that we were hanging out of. They were basing all of this, evidently, or it appears to be, on that same structure.
Now, don't you find that the layout of all of this, by the knowns and the ones you didn't know, it will indicate by math, and then on the math boards, if you and Theoretical were, this morning you were drawing all of this on a computer and lining it up based on celestial functions. This is where I thought the marriage of celestial to terrestrial would dazzle you, that not only is it theory, it is an application. And that's why I want to show you the rocks coming up. So let's go and get some rocks and look at them.
One more little thing. A little bit more comfortable than the last place. It was getting a little hot over there. A little better? Well, there was something over there that I wanted to mention, and that was that when the McCullen survey came up, they showed that the idea of the astrological... Well, there was something over there that I wanted to mention, and that was that when the McCullen survey came up, they showed that the idea of the astrological signs at Dindara was actually mapped into an aerial view from the sky. And so, again, it shows that the builders of the pyramids were well aware of the heavens and were utilizing that in there. I don't know if do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's not unusual. I mean, it's totally appropriate for that. Whether or not it's true or not, we have to eventually, science will eventually know for sure, but it's appropriate.
All right, so now we're dealing with Orthodox Egyptology to some sense that gives the randomness of the order of what we're looking at, such as Zawiyat is a 3rd dynasty pharaoh. Way far in the position that he decided to build his pyramid, he's in the 3rd dynasty before Khufu ever comes. and then all of a sudden the dynasties will place Khufu building his structure exactly where it is. And then he sends his son to go build one that's far away from Khufu, just up on a mountaintop. And then later we have the story that Khephren decides that he wants to build his next to his father, which is bigger than his brother's, and you got all this mythology messing around with something that's more scientific, but under the Egyptians moving in on top of it, claiming what's already there and assigning their names, it doesn't fit with the total picture as if, well, I'm Pharaoh, I want to build a pyramid to put my body in, and then my son will build right next to me. But then what about the one way out where Rigel needs to be and where the Messiah and all the others? You see, they break down because they don't tell us about where Bellatrix is. They don't tell us anything about Barak el-Khayyam. And so when you take it under the star format and you see it and you disregard all Egyptian mythology concerning the construction or the dating of it, and you put them all under one technological influence, which would be the full understanding of as well as you explain it, but it's very scientific, but it doesn't meet family, son, build, and why here and why over here. That's never explained.
Well, there's a great parallel to that because they always speculated where the Gothic cathedrals got put, and they only stood back 300 years later and they saw a fractal of Virgo on the land, and it was pentagonal and golden based.
And didn't they destroy or put everybody as witches on the spots that these things were, and then immediately erect a church on that spot? Isn't that most of what Europe is?
So what we really need to ask the question is, the pharaohs there, or whoever's in the pyramid, is dying, and their magnetic field has somehow been able to unfold in something to do with the Fibonacci and the 5 spirals on the plateau. And here is sort of the magnetism of their body and their heart. Suddenly, close your eyes, and sort of shamanically, or you see inside, you have this lucid dream kind of thing, and you see your magnetism unfold on the land outside you. Now, something about all these ancestors are giving us this nifty little clue that where your magnetism, your emotion, unfolds on the land has to fit a hole in the stars somewhere. It's like, so what is the clue here? And that's why I think we might want to have some talk about what does Orion mean magnetically, astrophysically, and as a place, where the shaman said that's the only wormhole out of here. How do we get that?
Right. And what is the text saying? It's the gateway to become Orion.
Yeah.
The shafts being air shafts for dead bodies, as opposed to maybe the Ba or the Ra, the soul of death, and then the reincarnation, because Egyptians leave their bodies and come back, or at least modern Egyptians tried to rediscover in the areas that they're just like Khufu being a restorationist, discovering the ceremony centers, and then saying, I want the emerald tablets. Well, that's in a flint box, and you had an excellent conversation on flint box. I mean, you've got all these sort of pieces floating and no major picture to lock it. I mean, you're dealing on your computer, you have Fibonacci, and you're coming in with the spirals, and I'm now showing you, okay, here's the real pattern instead of the computer and matching them this way, because if they match on the computer, they're going to definitely match in these structures, and that's what I wanted to get you guys excited by. You're in theory and you're in application, and I'm coming from the field archaeologist. I've got the evidence to confirm and validate you and you. Mm-hmm. But I need both of you, and we need a lot more minds to look at this to really make this an awakening, because all of a sudden, let's brush aside the dynasties of Egypt and let's look at the science.
Well, Drunvalo had a very good point when he said he talked to Hancock and Drunvalo, and they said, well, the 3 pyramids were offset, but they didn't really realize it specified an amount of curvature. Mm. And then when Drunvalo was talking about here's the Fibonacci and a 5 spiral there, this is the clue, because, you see, if magnetism is going to unfold from something little to something big, there's always this issue of the amount of curvature that permits the nodes on that magnetic line to unfold non-destructively. And this is this whole romance of this thing we find in the heartbeat at the moment of compassion, where it's sort of like a spark gap, that the harmonic series is what we call a power of phi, or log function of the golden mean. So here it is, we're not only discovering it enacted in our body, obviously, but on the Giza Plateau, if you arrange the major magnetic structures, so the magnetism can go from inside out, from inside your body, around that angle of curvature. In hydrodynamics, it's called optimized translation of vorticity, another name for the yellow brick road to Oz sort of thing. So anyway, this leads to this fun little conversation that I had with John Martin. Was over. He's sort of the scholar with Critchlow over there. He was at
yeah.
You remember he was in town.
He's got amazing work.
Yeah, coincidences. Yeah, and he said, well, we had just done all this stuff where we finally figured out the platonic symmetry of all 5 inner planets' orbitals was pentagonal. Pent within pent. It's all nifty. The Book of Coincidences, great work. And now he's written all his own software. It's kind of cool. And now he's directed all his attention to studying for platonic symmetry in star systems. And he's the one who pointed out to me that Pleiades and Sirius, if you look up in the sky, are at a 60-degree arc angle. And this mathematician up in Canada helped us actually do the math for this recently. And Orion is kind of like almost dead center in the center. And I was the one who pointed out to him that if you arrange pentagons in a 3D, obviously you get a dodecahedron. And if you nest dodeca inside dodeca and look from the side, you see 60 degrees. It's the hex view of the cube and the dodeca, the whole thing.
Right.
So basically the little clue here, the hint, was if waves are going to converge to center in what I've been calling implosion, this symmetry, these star systems, Sirius, Pleiades here, Orion's in midheaven, is actually literally the implosion angle. So the question sort of becomes, well, is this a clue to how Orion functions magnetically to let the magnetism of human perception or soul function as a wormhole? Or so I began to call it kind of like the tailbone of the local galactic sector, where good and bad gathers, and the tip of the spine functions as a straw, and that whole thing. Well, it's fun stuff.
So, is this one of the samples of this rock that?
Well, instead of using the rocks like in the park where we were just sitting at, I thought I would bring up one of the rocks with coins. And when we think of technology and we look at the Egyptians as the explanation of how they built Saqqara and the step pyramids, and then they evolved and evolved and evolved until they can construct something like the Great Pyramid. And we all know that there was a 200-year period that this whole thing was constructed in the early dynasties, and then what you would think was modern Egypt, they reverted back to mud. And when you find these structures in Fayum, which is coincidental with the Pleiades aspect of the 60, when you look for the terrestrial counterpart of what you're trying to say, there is a physical ceremonial center associated with everything you're saying, and that's why I want to be the rocks man and the navigator to tie you out of the celestial to the terrestrial, because these are things that we can put our hands on. We can see them, but this stone is 50% the anomalies, which we call coin.
Can they zoom in on that a little bit, maybe?
I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's little round things that look like coins with spirals that move in them, and
the Egyptians,
they're all over the.
These are from the oldest monuments in Egypt. They're associated with those.
Yeah.
And when we find them in the Great Pyramid, and then we find them out in the deserts associated with pyramids that are unknown, and then we find them in Lepus, and we find them in Heliopolis, we find them in every point of the Orion constellation. And these are miles and miles apart.
You can actually feel. Callahan did this whole thing where he proved that if you could not send magnetism through the soil conductively, you could measure the places and predict where war is going to break out. He did this in Yugoslavia, Israel, and Ireland. Mm-hmm. And his example of where magnetism goes best is limestone, which is what he calls paramagnetic, which functions as a lens for magnetism. Whereas if you have sandstone soil, and it's called dimagnetic, magnetism fights and can't make it through, those are the areas where you have patriarchy and wars and messes, because you don't get distributed emotion as well as distributed magnetism. And in here, these what were called coins, right? They actually look like fossilization, but I don't think it's fossil. If they look like interesting, because the hypothesis would be, I think, what did they say, that that the alkalinity of limestone is the alchemical symbolism of femininity, in that it is created space. In other words, acid rain is the opposite. Acid rain is very male. You have too many protons. Whereas alkaline limestone has a lot of matrix, a lot of space available in which to unpack pattern. So it has plenty of weft and woof. And that's what makes it a waveguide for magnetism. So in a sense, what you could say is they picked the best stone structures to function as a lens to steer magnetism around to make it a bloodstain.
Now, when you say selected, I, for one, have tried to find the quarries. I would theorize, I think there's a guy named Davidovich in Florida that came out of French, he's a chemist, that he in his analysis, would say that these were poured rock.
Yeah.
But Egyptologists have a problem with that, but I want to sort of take a broom, and I'm not interested in what Orthodox Egyptology has to say anymore, because they don't even know the Orion constellation is a mirror of the layout of the buildings, and they have some story of the dynasties in order to reveal what's known, where there's pieces that are still unknown that change the history of their story so quick that now I'm in an area by myself, and I'm relying on you guys to get you excited. But that's not the only one. When you look around now, I want to pull another one out, because this is like Felix's little bag of tricks. Here's another piece of the puzzle. Now, if we look at glyphs, and we can see that this stone was attached to something, and we can see that there's pink quartz all embedded here, and there was limestone all on this, and this is very flat, and there's an angle of 90-degree turns, and this is glass, because I had a professor at UCLA tell me what this was. Well, Egypt never, it was a copper civilization before the Bronze Age, and there's only so much temperature that can make copper. And copper isn't even hard enough to cut those stones. If you go and you look at the density and hardness of the coin with rock, it requires something more than copper to cut it and drag it and put it into place. But it's a convenient story that if you put science behind it, it soon falls away. They didn't have the technology. Then you look at something like this. This professor says, oh, this glass is probably maybe 20 years old. 20 years old with multi-thousand-year-old limestone of this nature embedded in it. He ignores the sea because it conflicts with any known technology that could construct or make such a piece of glass.
Where'd you find this?
This is for the star safe. This is right down in Berak El Khayyam, which is one of the Orion stars. And then we found a glyph that was done by Akhenaten and Nefertiti that has this same color stone embedded in the side of the hill with the temple, with little hand lines coming down with the Ankh and the rays of the sun. Put this rock in the sun, and boy, it's the best absorber of sun. Actually, you could cook an egg on it. It gets that hot.
Do you remember that story about the person on the street in Israel, or in Egypt, always said that when the stones floated in place, when the pyramids were built, they said it was sound that was doing it? And if you create a magnetic cascade that's implosive, that's enough to cut stone, the accompanying sound is the implosion harmonic. So what their mythology was that sound melted the stone to make it pourable.
Well, do you remember the one that said that the 12 stones were assembled and then they went away, and then God came the next day and fused them all into one?
And the possibility of fusion, if you take the symmetry of 12, which is dodeca.
All right, now, if you look at the stones, I got lots of these.
See, if fusion means 5 rays, and here's fire making this glass structure.
All right, another rock. All right. Now, when you look at the pyramids and you look at this material, and then you look at the bonding material of this, I think you're going to find they're exactly the same. This material is without the coin in it.
That's right. This has no coin.
But it's the same. But it's the same as this. All right. Now, look at this little glass material of this. I think you're going to find they're exactly the same. This material is without the coin in it.
That's right. This has no coin.
But it's the same. But it's the same as this. All right. Now, look at this little glass bead that runs in between here.
Right.
That's what fuses the stones together. There is no space between them. Now, did they drag and cut and carve?
Looks like a partial melt.
And if you're real clever on it, you'll find that there's another line that runs through here that joins this stone, this one, and this one all together. These come from the Pyramid of Abu Dawash, or Rigel.
Well, we have this technology of cement.
I don't know if you can see this or not.
It's incredible, isn't it?
A little tiny line.
And it's a glass material, and I'm not sure if it's what's this stuff? Amber?
See, we have the technology cement, which is essentially liquid stone, but we haven't learned the actual sort of molecular symmetries in order to what we call melt that.
But we can do, well, I don't think melt is mix it, because when we actually get back to a point that if we look...
It heat as we know it.
Yeah, and what is cement?
Yeah, exactly. It's chemistry more than heat.
And what did Rome use to build the Colosseum?
Right. Well, see, so
and the aqueducts and all that was cement, wasn't it?
Well, so the overall metaphor here is what we do with magnetism. I mean, in a sense, we're recognizing that if we can braze the magnetism, we can cut the rock. If we can braze the magnetism, we can create a waveform that's sustainable, whether it's DNA, or whether it's the architecture, or whether it's the magnetic lines through the land, or it's the magnetic lines through the stars. In each case, if the braid is what we call recursive, or self-embedded, or fractal, then that wave can re-enter itself non-destructively, and we call it self-aware.
At the location that by geogravitational phenomenon, it has to sit at the spot, and it has to be of materials. But now in the quest to find out what was the material, when we look backwards for history, we knew that the Greek knew how to use cement. We knew that the Romans knew how to use cement. But then from the time of the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, that was lost. And so for a long time, history up to the 1800s still didn't have cement. But for the only mentality, everything had to be cut in like this. But then we rediscovered cement, the Portland, and look what in just a few years, in 200, that is done in America.
And those are all just the fossils of our ancestors, really, because the essence of the calcium in the cement is really the ability of ancestors' bones.
Right, it's tied to that.
Into memory, really.
Yeah. This is mostly calcium. Well, if we tie all this together, what we're talking about, where the stars that are in the sky are duplicated, you might say, by buildings on the surface of the Earth, all of this, the reason for them doing that had to do with expanding consciousness, of moving from one way of interpreting the reality into another. You can call it resurrection or ascension or anything else like that. And I believe that the reason that we are understanding all the pieces today, why it's all coming together, why you're understanding this and you're understanding all these things, is because we are at this moment, this very moment in history, remembering what our ancient brothers and sisters knew, and we're about to live it. And Egypt is a big key in all of this. I believe that there is much more hidden in all of this, not just on the surface in the sky, but in the earth also, that will surface in the near future, and that it'll become clear that what they were doing, what they were setting up, wasn't just for then, but it was also for right now, for right this very minute.
Yeah, if somebody was like in their own backyard saying, well, gee, the Egyptians knew that for their kids' memories to survive, they had to make some kind of magnetic picture, and then the Templars building the Gothic cathedrals said, oh, we got to make some kind of magnetic picture. And in each case, they knew that their children's memories literally would not become stars unless they made a little kind of lens to project them. In fact, there's a fascinating story. A group that's working with the cathedral studies believes that we call them zodiac landscape fractals, that projecting the zodiac on the land switched places at one particular time in history. And they believe that for a time, and I believe the Middle Ages roughly, all zodiac fractals were projected like straight down, and then there was another time in history when all the star maps on the land were built as mirror images of what's in the stars. And the difference...
That's what you see at Dendar, actually. It's in reverse. It's a mirror image.
And that's the mystery. Well, the clue here is, when is consciousness arriving at the Earth, and when is consciousness being harvested from the Earth? And one way you can understand that...
Death and resurrection?
In a sense.
Is that a word?
Yeah. And if you're talking to a physicist, you can give them a clue on this, because they're all wondering why all biological proteins, all the DNA on the planet, has a stairway up the down staircase that goes one way. It's called enantiomorphism, the handedness. All biological proteins go one way. If you make them go the other way, you get NutraSweet, and it's cancerous, right? Yeah, it's true. Sure. So the idea is that now the mystery is, well, how did all of our stairways, the helices of our biological proteins, all go one way? And they realized, well, what started them all was the voltage between the Earth and the sky, the lightning that spun the primal soup. So here's the protein saying, how are we going to spin to eat a new dimension, right? Well, all of that lightning was going one way. Now, what they say is the voltage, the DC voltage between the Earth and the heaven, like male and female, is like plus to minus. But the voltage difference between the galactic center and the galactic periphery is the opposite. So now what just to finish the thought, what voltage literally means there is plus and minus charge is a name for flow lines that either do more converging or diverging, packing versus unpacking. So there's a time in history, which may well be now, when our magnetic, our memory, our genetic, our love, really needs to unfold, unpack, which is more feminine. Adam meant hard-making. Yeah. So, I mean, the suggestion here is the unfolding of consciousness, which I, in a sense, define or describe as self-reference and recursion, is made possible by these zodiac landscape structures.
Now, I understand what you're saying. And in your area of magnetism of plus and minus,
coming and going, Jacob's ladder, all that.
But part of this in your constructive model, there are two things that conduct electricity very well. One is water, and the other is granite.
Well, it's actually paramagnetic stone, limestone.
Well, granite even better.
Yes, granite is also.
It's the optimum.
That's it.
All right. No stone will conduct electricity better than granite. And we were just discussing the possibility of them being able to pour granite also by the characteristics of what you saw in Mexico and the various regions around the world, and nobody wants to admit it. But what I want to kind of get back in this balance of power, flow, and things is that in your model, put the firmament back up. You know what the firmament is?
Yeah. Re-inhabit the stars you came from.
But put the water back up and make the cloud bases like Venus and the gaseous planets that we see, because that also is one of the capacitors in the electricity balance of what we're talking about.
Spark that. And
gravity is the only thing that can separate salt water from fresh water, and in a sense it's done by the regulation of the temperature. And when we increase the temperature and the greenhouse effect, we eventually put all this water up, and then we lower the water levels, and maybe the pyramids in Japan will come back up, off Japan, and then the ones in Bemini Wall and all these megaliths that are, in a sense, secrets of the deep will come back up. So when we rebuild the world that was utilizing the things that you're talking about, the balance of the soul, the good side positive being the transmitter of Egypt as opposed to the Chinese pyramids being Draco, then, I mean, it becomes fascinating more and more because we're tying this picture closer together.
Well, we were asking Drunvalo earlier, actually, about his connection with Thoth, and Thoth's connection with, was it the Anunnaki or the Nephilim? Nephilim, because the story here is if the geomancy of China at the Senshi Pyramid is really a fractal of Draco, and the dragon cult was the origin of the Chinese culture, then the myth about the Orion Queen Draco having, like the Borg Queen, lots of telepathy but not quite enough compassion, and so you have this kind of hive mind mentality, which does in a way characterize the Chinese to some extent, and that symbolizes then the sort of, in the high-end seraphim here, which I associate with the Nephilim, so, versus the other side of the sort of reptilian brain, which is the bird brain, which I associate with Aku, Akhenaten, and Obenu. And so, again, you have this, can the serpent brain feed the bird brain, is really carried out in the land in terms of the culture is based on the primary fractality, embeddedness of its major geomantic structures. So it's like the culture of China is pointed to Draco, the culture of Egypt was pointed to Orion, the culture of the Templars was pointed to Virgo. You know, you have these, like, pieces of the sunflower seed unfolding how we're going to point our genes into stars.
All right, now in this, you're the best one. I've seen one photograph of the pyramids in China. And earlier you were talking about that is a complex that will rival what we see in Giza. What did you mean by all that?
Well, my sister has become very well known in China. She's been there many, many times now. And they have taken her to places in China. Now, she's been to Egypt 31 times, I believe it is. And,
I've only been 19.
And she's been in just about every building there is there many times. and she knows what's there, but she's saying that what's in China, in places that they will not allow the rest of the world to go, that she's seen with her eyes, is far surpasses Egypt. So I think we don't really know. I think we only know a piece of it. And when you mention Japan also, those new pyramids that are being found underneath the water are only 2 of over 100 major pyramids, some of them bigger than the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
And they exist on the land in Japan. They're already there with huge blocks that are 100 tons, and just like in Egypt. And they're there now. They're not. Nobody knows they're there except the Japanese know they're there. They go to them, but that whole structure is there. And Childers, David Childers, is talking about what's going on in the South Pacific. There's whole structures in the South Pacific that again rival what's going on in Egypt. It's incredible what's on the Earth.
Exactly. Now, what mathematical model in your mind can tie all this together that gives a utilitarian purpose behind it? Because I don't see culture building, dropping, with all this similar technology of why the pyramid, why the place. I mean, you've gone why, but there's still something connectivity.
Well, from our point of view, which we've been studying this, and everybody's got different views, I realize, but we believe that almost 13,000 years ago, the poles shifted. We changed orbits. We were no longer, our consciousness fell down to a very low place where we are now from where we were. And that all of the structures that have been built all over the world were built by a single mind, a single thought. And the purpose was to geomance into the Earth to recreate what are called the grids around the Earth.
64-point tetrahedral geometry?
Well,
maybe.
And then you have 8 tetra fit in dodeca as 2 per cube. So, I mean, basically the hypercube is dodecaicasa.
It's dodecaicasa. It's that relationship.
Can you do that in layman's terms? You guys are good.
Actually, very simple. If you connect every other vertex of the cube, you have a tetra.
Right.
Or you just draw a diagonal every face of the cube, you have a tetra.
Right.
So 2 tetra make a cube. Now, if you take that cube, sit it on the floor, very easy, tilt it up 32 degrees, look straight down, spin it slowly, and blink 5 times.
You'll see
a dodecahedron.
Every 72 degrees.
Right. Okay, so what that is, and the edge length of the edge length good model. The edge length of that pentodec is 0.618 to the edge of the cube, and that's a wave that can add and multiply with respect to itself, which permits self-embedding and starts implosion happening. And what that does is, that is the definition of self-reference, that you can go out in your own backyard, make a map of your backyard, where the magnetic spirals are, and learn to recognize the principle of embedding for yourself.
Okay, well, this grid that's around the world, which made of the dodecaicosahedral grid, that I believe is the reason why all the pyramids were built, and that's what is happening now, is that we are now emerging into another level of consciousness that we could not have done if all those pyramids were not built all over the world. And the key lies in what you're finding, that curve and the 3 stars, the grid, and there's something there that is phenomenal for us. We'll see in the near future, I believe.
My personal research is that I'm dealing with light and light-controlled systems. That's what originally took me to Egypt, where I just wanted to study the Great Pyramid for the geometry that was necessary to control sunlight. But dealing with light and light-controlled systems. That's what originally took me to Egypt, where I just wanted to study the Great Pyramid for the geometry that was necessary to control sunlight. But when I got deeper, I needed to be able to transmit the light, as if Osiris was the transmission point, and the ley lines of Letopolis and Heliopolis and distribution from that point would require receptacles around to keep light moving, because in the black hole of the system that we're looking at, it was a utilitarian motive on a global scale. The Earth rotating one pyramid out of sun, in sun, out of sun, in sun, all the way around, so that when you blinked your eye once, the light could travel in that 7 seconds, but it required the organization of preset things like transmissions of microwaves that we use today that these were the points of control in a grid that would go through summer, winter, all the continuous changes that were governed by gravity, because they express gravity, they work with gravity, they control light effectively, and the missing points would be China and around the world. So my research leads me that way, and that's why, when you're talking like this with China and that, maybe the utilitarian had to do with the control of it as a source of power as opposed to nuclear fossil.
So maybe the actual principle of unbedding like a rose and finding this flower in the land is what happens in the heart, on the land, and in the stars. If we really learn to recognize it, we'll recognize life and soon we'll actually see it. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks you guys. Thanks a lot. It's been really good.
I'm glad to have the opportunity to take out loud. All over.
All right. Good.